started?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So everyone, welcome. So nice to see you all here. I created some printouts tonight because we want to do some self-reflection, right? The topic tonight is rewriting our story and becoming the authors of our own lives. And with that, before we can actually rewrite a story, right, we have to understand what it means, what we mean by story. A story isn't necessarily a fact, right? A story is a meaning that we attach to our experiences. So it's basically our interpretation, our perception, our perspective, and how we look at the things that happen to us, okay? And we put a story upon the fact, okay? So often what happens that these stories, they begin with becoming protective parts of ours, right? They're trying to protect us. So as a child, maybe something happens and the decision or the story becomes, I'm not good enough, or people always leave, love isn't safe, I have to do everything myself, right? These are stories. But over time, because we repeat these thoughts over and over again, what happens, we stop questioning them and we stop seeing them as opinions or perspectives or survival strategies, right? But rather we begin believing that they're absolute truths, where in fact they're not. They're only the lens that you're viewing them at. Okay? So I want to put the first question out for you guys to reflect on. What story are you telling yourself about your life right now? Right? Because the story that you believe determines how you feel, which determines how you will act, what you expect, and ultimately the life that you create. Okay? So for examples, I'm stuck. Nothing ever works out for me. People always hurt me. I'll never change. I'm too broken. This marriage will never improve. Right? What if the story that you've been telling yourself, though, isn't really the whole story? Many of us are living with stories that are written by pain, fear, disappointment, childhood wounds, betrayals, right? But slowly, slowly, we stop realizing that they're stories and we start believing, well, this is simply who I am. That's all, right? Nothing I can do about it. But tonight we're going to ask something different. Can your story be rewritten? And even deeper, who's actually holding the pen that's writing your story? Viktor Frankl teaches us something. Even in the suffering, we always have a choice, right? And Judaism, of course, says even in the suffering, nothing is ever random. Together, we may not choose what's actually happening to us, but we can choose who we become through what's happening to us. So we will travel through 4 parts on how to rewrite our stories tonight. How does that sound? Bye-bye. Any comments?
Right off the bat, in Bereshit, in Genesis, Torah tells us, Zeh Sefer Toldot Adam. This is the book, the chronology of mankind, etc. Our sages note that our life is a story. It's a narrative. But whose narrative is it? It's Hashem's narrative. We can not augment the story. That's not up to us to do. In davening, and Chassidus really elaborates this, we say Baruch she'amar v'haya olam. Blessed is he who speaks, and the world comes to be. The entire world is being created, as we've been learning and learning over, on a continual basis. Every instant is another frame of the story. Every particular nuance is part of the story. There's a monumental talk in 1953 around Yubei Tammuz, where the Rebbe asked a foundational question. How is it possible that in Hashem's world, where Hashem is intimately involved with every detail of the world, there can be bad? The Rebbe delved into this concept, uprooting the point that if it's Hashem's world, then it cannot be bad. But the issue is that it looks that way, it feels that way. There's loss, there's suffering, there's pains, there's upheavals. Now, how could we say there's no bad? The Rebbe explains and drew a very, very powerful parable from a new technology, which was the edit feat, where what's the purpose of an editor to a writer? What's the purpose of an editor?
To perfect whatever was written.
Whatever was written was perfect.
Mm-hmm. To fix it up.
It's not broken. The editors.
The name's on it.
The editor.
It's there to edit.
Edit, right? But edit for what? In order to be able to stream in accordance to the understanding of the readers.
To tell the story better.
It's mitzad the author. The author has the idea. A typical author, human being, has an idea and elaborates, and the story fits perfectly in their mind. But the readers, the listeners, might not understand it. Therefore, the editor's work is to take the original narrative and tweak it, change it around, so the readers could internalize the editor's essential intent. The Rebbe explains that every frame of life is being created constantly, being brought into being constantly from nothing to something out of Hashem's benevolence. But that's only half of the story. The other half is, how do we, his editors-in-chief, utilize this raw signal that was given to us and produce a signal that will be able to be internalized by the world.
Mm.
For that reason, we're not here to write a story. We're here to edit the story that's being passed down to us from generation to generation. And at that, the former chief rabbi of England, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, once gave a tremendous parable to this. He says, imagine you're walking down a long corridor. On both sides of the corridor, there's bookshelves upon bookshelves upon bookshelves, millions of books. You come closer to the books, and you see that each book is titled by a last name. In other words, each book is a book that was written by an entire lineage. And then inevitably you come to the book of your family. Open it up, chapter 1. Thousands of years ago, and you see the pains and the ups and the downs and the pogroms and the expulsions and the joys and the celebrations, the Brit Milah in the darkness and Chupot in the underground, and so on and so forth. Makes for a riveting story. And as you skim through the pages, eventually you come to the chapter called You. And you see that chapter is filled with several pages already, but there are many blank pages missing. There are many pages blank. Says Rabbi Sachs, that's because every day we're writing more and more into this book. Every day we're putting a sentence, even a word, a sentence, a paragraph, etc., etc. Sometimes we go back and we revise it. But nevertheless, one thing for sure we cannot do, just close up the book before our chapters are done. Because inevitably, we give that book over to our children. And they're going to take it, and they're going to give it to their children. We certainly spoke about several times the intergenerational traumas
That's right.
that were just given by very well-meaning parents and to their parents and their parents and their parents. In other words, as we spoke about many times, we don't blame the previous generation because, quite frankly, they didn't have the tools, the knowledge, the
And
resources.
they're always doing their best.
And they did
Everybody's
their
always doing their best.
very best. As we said many
true.
times, the aim as parents is to raise our children above, as tall as we can stand, on our tippy toes and maybe jumping, and raise them above where we came from. That's the best we can do. Because our parents did the best they could do with whatever tools, whatever resources, limited as it were. But for that reason, we need to understand that we can't just say, well, this was given to me, I didn't ask for this, and so on and so forth. Because, first of all, as we learned several times, your neshama did ask for it. Number two, your soul asked for it before it descended into this world, knowing that these variables, these details, these ups and their downs are the ones that are going to hone you in and make you focus better. We are here to revise what psychology calls metabolize the trauma. Take everything that was given until now and say, all right, this is coming from Hashem. I don't need to bury my head in the sand, because if Hashem gave this to me, He believes in me to be able to take this blank page and fill it up with meaningful narratives. So my children and their children and their children will be able to read, and they will grow from that, and they will help their children grow from that.
So the first step is awareness. Right?
First thing is awareness.
First
Always
step is
comes down to
awareness.
awareness.
That's it. So to piggyback off of what Rabbi was saying, right? Part one are the stories that we inherit, right? Besides our intergenerational traumas, we also are we're not consciously writing our stories. We're unconsciously repeating our stories, right? There's stories that were inherited from our childhood. Something happens and there's decisions that we make, and I have to be strong, I'm too much, I'm not enough, love isn't safe. All these little decisions that are made from your childhood and this internal self-talk that comes even into your adulthood, these are stories that we've told ourselves, and somehow inside of us we made them as fact, right? But as we learned from our inner child class, right, these beliefs that are part of us, they're actually protections. At some point, they served us. They gave us some sort of protection. A younger part of us learned, right, if I believe this, then I will be safe, right? But the very thing that once protected us can quietly become something that limits us, can quietly actually become a prison almost that we're living in, right? So everyone, I want you to reflect on this. What belief about yourself have you repeated for years? Ask yourself this question. Bring awareness into what you're doing. Look at it and see, what is it? Is there a story behind the story? Is there something more that you're not even seeing because it's become a part of you and you're living through that story that you've told yourself, right? So we know with Emunah that nothing is coincidence. Nothing is accidental, right? None of the disappointments, the delays, the heartbreaks, the difficult relationships, the painful chapters in our lives, right? Everything that happens is directly from Hashem. It's for our ultimate good. So, but this doesn't really mean that pain feels good, right? Everyone understands that. It doesn't mean that pain feels good. It means that pain has a purpose. Hashem has a reason for everything that happens. What changes, though, is if we shift our perception that our struggles are somehow there as punishments to our struggles are actually divine guidance. Okay, if we're able to shift that perception, you're on your way to recover and to shift and to change that story and change who you think you've been until now. Part 2 of shifting your story, you gotta ask yourself, do I want to be a victim or do I want to be the author of what's happening to me? I know in the past we've discussed Viktor Frankl several times. I mean, does everyone know who Viktor Frankl was? Do you know Viktor Frankl? So Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist that nearly lost everything in the concentration camps. His pregnant wife, everything was stripped away. His dignity, his freedom, his possessions, his family, he lost everything. But yet, Frankl observed one very, very big part of humanity, which was some people spiritually collapsed while others retained their humanity. Through all of that, why? Only because of one of Frankl's greatest quotes, everything can be taken from man, but one thing. What's the one thing, Rabbi?
Purpose.
Purpose, meaning, yes. But he said the freedom to choose one's attitude. Everything can be taken from man, but one thing, the freedom to choose one's attitude, and no matter what is happening around them.
When I was a rabbi in Cleveland, the then mayor of Cleveland, Mayor Jackson, asked me to do a Holocaust symposium in City Hall for Holocaust Remembrance Day. He asked me to bring a Holocaust survivor. I looked around the community. I finally found a woman in her late 80s, and she agreed to come to City Hall to talk. She talked for about 15, 20 minutes. But one of the sentiments that she shared seared itself into my mind. Literally, that's probably the only thing I remember of that entire speech. It says, by the time I got off the cattle carts into Auschwitz, I'd already lost my entire family. Everything was taken away from me. All my friends, my family, my possessions, soon enough my hair, my clothing. My work detail, she continued, was in the middle of the Poland winter in Auschwitz, in the freezing cold. My work detail was to rummage through the snow to find weeds and pick them out. That was my work detail. When I questioned why is that necessary, the SS officer cruelly responded that we want to get a point across to you dirty Jews. In Auschwitz, nothing survives, not weeds and not Jews. Upon concluding this point, she shared a very deep foundational observation. She said, again, they took everything I had away from me. Everyone that I knew and loved away from me. Everything that was near and dear and familiar to me was stripped away from me. They did everything to strip me of my humanity. But there was one thing that they couldn't do, that they couldn't take. They couldn't take me from me. They couldn't take my will to live. There's a concept that is called the dual stories, dual narratives. What type of narrative do we have as a reference point at all times to our perception? In other words, as we've been speaking about in the morning's classes, we don't see with our eyes. Sure, the eyes pick up the signal, but it's the mind that translates what we see. Seeing is not objective, it's very subjective. And so the question is, what type of paradigm do we have running as a prompt in the background of our mind to translate that which we see and experience? So there's a dual narrative, two types of stories we can tell ourselves. There's what's called a rat story, and the other one called a river story. And they're both based on the very same details, the very same seemingly objective reality. Where it gains meaning is within ourselves. Now, this happens often at a subconscious level. The person not even aware that they're experiencing this post-editing.
Go back to awareness. Everything is awareness.
So there's a rat story or river story. And it's based again in the same reality. A rat story is a narrative that we subconsciously and many times even consciously tell ourselves why things are not going to work, why things shouldn't happen. It's an old anecdote. A guy needs to borrow a horse. So he starts walking up a hill to his neighbor, and and as he's walking up to his neighbor's home to ask him to borrow the horse and the carriage, at first he's very confident, but then as he's walking, he starts telling himself, maybe he's not going to give it to me. And why? It's because several months ago we got into an argument. And then he goes back and tells himself, well, yeah, but we patched things up. He says, yeah, but I never really felt warm with it afterwards. He's walking. And then he says, and perhaps he might not even be willing to give it to me because he didn't feel that we truly patched things up. And then he says to himself, not only that, he's probably going to be upset that I never fully apologized. Cut things short, by the time he knocks on his neighbor's door and the neighbor just opens the door, he says, you know what? He says to the neighbor, keep your horse and keep your wagon, nobody needs that anyway. In other words, the narratives that we tell ourselves before anything even happened, before we had the chance to respond, cause us to immediately react. So a rat story is the story that we basically keep deep within ourselves. It might rear itself into our consciousness, but nevertheless, it is the background processes. Tells us why things are not going to work. A river story is a type of narrative that tells us that because of this, things are going to flow forward. Give you a perfect example. Steven Spielberg, the great producer, Schindler's List, E.T., Indiana Jones, he has dyslexia. And dyslexia in Hollywood is a plague, because for someone who needs to read script after script, and he himself self-admittedly says most screenwriters and producers read through scripts within an hour, 2 hours. For me, it'll take about a day.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And therefore, that's a rot story from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to write, but I didn't ask for this dyslexia. It's not my fault. Better find a better career path. But he turned that seeming rot story into a river story. How? He says, because it takes me an entire day to go through the script, by the time I've went through the script, I've really identified the characters, the protagonists, the antagonists, the emotions, the humanity, the nuances. And for that, his scripts seem so vibrant and alive. The same scenario, the same point. He could change that point as many as stories he would tell. No, I don't have to decide. Yeah, of course you do. Who gave it you? God. You want to blame God? You could. You could live a life
So
of a
his
wrestler.
ailment was actually a gift.
That's it. That's the editorial.
Mm-hmm.
That's the editorial.
There you go.
We're not here writing the world. We're co-creators, yes. But the way we revise based on truth, as we said many times, all facts are true but don't necessarily represent the truth. What initially seems like factual truth, and because of this I won't, no.
It's a victim mentality.
But that's the victim. Understanding that Hashem only gave this to you, God only gave this to you because He really believes in your ability as an editor to take this and grow because of this, change the world because of this.
That's right. That's right. It's fantastic. Thank you for that. So if everything can be taken from man, except the one thing, which is the freedom to choose one's attitude, right? Ask yourselves, what is there that you can choose with whatever is going on in life? You can choose your responses. You can choose the meaning that you give to things, right? You can choose the next step. What's next, right? Not why me, what's next, right? You can choose your mindset. You can definitely choose your character. Who are you going to become through what is happening around you, right? Between stimulus and response, there's a small space. And in that space, you have the power to choose who you are becoming. I'll give you a marriage example, right? So a husband says something painful to the wife. The wife automatically, he doesn't love me. As that story goes right into it, right? So the reaction is what? Hurt, defense, criticism of herself and probably him, and creates distance between the two. Now let's look at the scenario a different way. Stimulus comes in, husband says something hurtful. Pause. Ask herself, what else can be true? Right? What if instead of reacting from her pain, she responds with curiosity? If we look at curiosity, the base word of curiosity is what? Cure. The cure is always inside curiosity. Instead of reacting, become curious. Ask questions. Ask what else can be possibly true, right? And where else and how else can I respond to whatever is happening instead of responding from my pain? How else can I respond to this? This is not denial of what is happening. This is choice. This is choosing to see something differently, look at it differently, and therefore react or respond to it differently, right? Because your reaction becomes part of your story, right? What's interesting is that Emunah and our connection to Hashem starts and becomes stronger when we actually stop controlling the things that are around us. When control ends, Emunah becomes stronger. Acceptance, therefore, is not giving up right? Acceptance is trusting that Hashem is present in every chapter of your life, through loss, through illness, through divorce, through dating struggles, through marriage struggles. Ask yourself, can pain exist without the meaning of hopelessness being attached to it? Right? And the answer is always yes. When you add meaning to something that is happening, that feeling of hopelessness will go away. And what if that difficult chapter is shaping you instead of breaking you? Think. Now finish the sentence. Maybe this challenge, whatever it is, came into my life to teach me X. X. Patience, softness, boundaries, self-worth, compassion, surrender, faith, right? There's always a reason. We might not know the reason at the time that it's happening, but we need to trust that there is a reason for whatever is happening and be able to let go. Letting go is actually power. Letting go is taking you from victim to victor, from victim to author, because it's giving you the ability to go forward. It's giving you the ability to make the next decision, to decide on what am I going to do next.
There's just one
Caveat.
editorial. I wouldn't necessarily, and I definitely understand where that sentiment attach meaning to it. But we work from the inwards. That's what Torah teaches us, to look at everything from the inward dimension. In as much as you look at your nose, obviously it doesn't look like your thumb or your toe. However, the same DNA that's in your nose is the same DNA that's in your toe and your thumb. So from the inward dimension, you would be able to discern the entire self. From an inward dimension, we don't have to find the meaning. We don't have to find the meaning, attach a meaning. That formula, cause plus blank equals the effect. As we said, cause plus the way we choose to view the cause, the way we choose to respond to the cause will determine the effect. But all causes boil down to one thing, God. It's Hashem. Everything that you have or you don't have is from Hashem. We are not here to control. The thought is let go, let in. When we let go of that need to continuously control, that is to facilitate. We're here to facilitate. When we are able to let go of that control, we let in. What do we let in? God. But where is that? Inside of us. So long as we are vying to control because of pain, because of suffering, because of trauma, because of this, we are holding our inner selves hostage. Because it's only our animal soul, our ego, that records all that pain and the suffering and the trauma for training purposes. And therefore it doesn't allow vulnerability, doesn't allow change, doesn't allow any self-reflection because it's scared. But with that in mind, we don't allow anything else to come in. We're just repeating the same patterns, maybe with a slight variance than we did previously or our previous generations. But the Torah teaches us a whole different way of looking at it. Our sages in the Talmud tell us that when Esther the queen agreed to basically barge in to the king's palace, or Hashverosh's palace, her husband's palace, unsummoned, as per the royal protocol, that the queen would have to be given a 30-day summons and prepare herself in order to come and speak to and meet with her husband. Mordechai coaxed her, you got to go now. When after davening it and having the entire Jewish people daven, and after fasting for 3 days, she finally enters the palace. But right as she enters the palace, she sees this big statue. And for whatever reason, all that spiritual bravado, all that Ruach HaKodesh dissipated. And she felt so alone. And she screamed out, Kayli, Kayli lama zavtani, my God, why have you abandoned me? The Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch in his Midrash to Tehillim, which is, this line is in chapter 22 of Tehillim, of the Psalms, says we could read the same word, Lama Zaftani, why did you abandon me? But the same Lam and Mem Hey could be read Lema Zaftani, for what? Says Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, don't read it Lama, why do you leave me, but for what? What's the difference? Why is a victim question. Why me? Why did I do? What did I do to deserve this? Why me? Why did I get this line and not this line? Why? That in itself throws a person into a complete pandemonium. For what? We're not looking to attach a meaning. The fact that you put me here, the fact that you gave this, the fact that everything happened till this moment, the way it happened must mean there's an intrinsic meaning behind it. Because whatever it is, it's all God.
There's a reason behind it.
Everything we went through thus far is all God. And so your parents, your grandparents, your ups and your downs, your friends and your enemies, all of that was God until this point. So you want to question God, why? Well, the sentiment is, if I understood God, I would be God. And I think it was Woody Allen, I forgot. I think it was Woody Allen. I wouldn't want to serve a God that would think like me. Right? In other words, if I could understand God, He's not God. He's an image of me. God makes us in His image, and we try to make God in our own image, which is very painful. However, the question is, what for? If this is the way things happen, and this is what God in His infinite will and wisdom, out of His benevolence, created for me to deal with, there must be a purpose. Exactly. So there's no reason to blame or shame or to be upset or be angry, and to further a rat story. Well, because this happened to me, I can't. Because you did this, you already said this. There's no way I could move forward. That's it. No, you can't. That's not the purpose. The purpose is, because you said this to me, because now we have to look at things from a whole different level in order to move forward.
It's very interesting for me, because you're talking about control, right? At the end of the day, that's what this is. We all think we actually have control over the things that are happening. The only things in life that we have control over is our own thought, speech, and action. That's it. That's it. The only thing that we have control over in this world, I'll say it again, is our own thought, speech, and action. Nothing else. The results of our thought, speech, and action, or whatever we think we're doing in order to control it, that result belongs to God. We have no control over what is going to happen. We can only control what we think, what we say, and how we behave. And that's it. Okay? So when you think about life in those terms, life is really not that complicated. The more we try to control, the harder life becomes. The more things we think we're in control of, right? Whether it's our business, our finances, our kids, the more things we think we're in control of, the harder our life actually becomes. I love the term, let go and let God. Do your best and let go. Do your best and let go. Everything will be fine.
I really like what you said about being curious, bring curiosity, because that's part of the cure.
Yes.
So instead of asking why this is happening, it's what am I becoming?
Okay.
Becoming curious, why did this happen? Where is it leading me to? And who am I becoming because of what happened?
Beautiful. Absolutely. That is so valid. With my life coaching clients, they ask why this, why, and that's such a big no-no. You never ask why. Why? When you ask yourself why, you know what happens to you internally. I'm going on a tangent a little bit, but it's an important thing to understand. When you say why, what you do is you limit yourself. You put yourself into this little box because there is no answer. And you're looking for an answer where it doesn't exist, okay? So you're suppressing yourself, you're suppressing your thoughts, you're suppressing your emotions, your feelings, and everything, and you're limiting your own ability to actually do better than you think you can, right? But instead of asking why, you ask, okay, what? And you ask, what's next? What could I have done differently? Or what can I do now to make it better? You ask yourself, what can I do? Where can I go from here? Not why did it happen? You can't go backwards. You don't want to limit yourself. You don't want to make your world smaller. You want to expand your vessel. You want to create space for yourself, right? The word why limits you. It brings you down and brings you into a much smaller world. You want to create space for yourself? Ask what, where, how, okay? Create space. Give yourself the space to grow, all right? So, where were we at? Part 3, the difference between facts and stories. This is fascinating, right? One of the most powerful ways that we begin rewriting our story is the awareness and the learning that separates what actually happened from the meaning that we attach to what happened. I'll give you a few examples. All right, so a guy that someone is dating didn't text back. The story in the girl's head is he doesn't like me, right? Fact is he didn't text. Story is he doesn't like me. She doesn't know that, but she builds that story, right? Fact, the marriage feels distant, but the story, we're doomed, right? It almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when you start to think about life like that. Fact, I failed at something. Story, I'm a failure. Giving yourself that label will, again, limit you, right? Ask yourself, what story are you adding to your pain? The pain is there, yeah, it happened. And as we just discussed, it happened for a reason, okay? But what story are you attaching to that pain that's limiting you, that's even keeping you in place? And how can you shift it to get you moving, right? Because the suffering is not in the event. The suffering is in the meaning that we give to the event, right? So we want to become the author, right? Obviously, Hashem is the author, but we want to become the author of the stories that we're telling ourselves and the meanings that we're attaching to the facts that are happening in our life. Going back to Frankl, another one of his great quotes, when you're no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves, right? You're not defined by what's happened to you. You are shaped by who you choose to become. So I have a couple of practical exercises we can do, and I think I wrote a few of them on the sheets. Feel free to take those home and work on them because they actually help you transform the way you look at things. So if we have an old story, right, which is what I've been believing till now, like for example, I'm not lovable, I always struggle, nobody loves me, I'm broken, God forbid, you know. Sorry?
We don't get no Shabbos.
There you go. I have no control. You know, we tell ourselves these limited beliefs, right? Ask yourself, did this story protect me at some point? And then ask, does this story still serve me? When you ask yourself, does this story still serve me? You're going to see it doesn't. And if it doesn't, it's time to let it go. Let it go, right? and replace it with a new story. Instead of I'm broken, how can we state that in the positive? Instead of I'm broken, how about I'm healing, right? Instead of nothing works out for me, how about Hashem is guiding me, even when I cannot see it, right? Instead of I'm alone, how about I'm supported, I'm growing, and I'm becoming, okay?
You know that song that I just released, Thank God for the
I
Friend?
did. That was kind of fun. I liked it.
That was born from a very difficult period in my life where everything.
You wrote that?
Yeah.
Did you really?
Yeah.
That was very.
Yeah. All the songs on Happy Head. It's the guy wrote it or she.
You have to follow him on Instagram. He's a lot of fun.
This is on YouTube. All the tracks, like about 12,
Nice.
15, 17 tracks now. But
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Oh.
but he came from a very, very painful time, a very, very painful place. But the sentiment of the song is, I don't believe in not the ups or the downs, not the smiles or the frowns. They don't define me. There's a me in here, right? And that if you listen to the songs that I write, it's a repetitive theme. So the thread that binds almost every single song, the cracks. And forget about your, how Leonard Cohen said, forget about your perfect offering. Everything has a crack, and that crack is where the light enters. To bring out a point that you just brought out, and we just spoke about this last night. There are clothes that at some point of our lives fit very well, and perhaps it shielded us from the weather or the comfort, whatever it is. Let's just say when we were 15 years old, 16 years old, how much more so when we were 3 years old, or 5 years old, or 10 years old. Imagine trying to don on these clothes today. Imagine trying to put these clothes on today, no matter how comfortable, how well they fit back then. Today, not only are they going to be comfortable, they're going to be very restrictive. We won't get it past our heads, even the shirts, and it's going to make our heads feel very tight. The same applies to the garments of the soul. Our soul is beyond interfacing with the world. For that reason, Hashem layered up the soul with 3 garments: the garments of thought, the garment of speech, and the garment of action. Those we can control. We can control our feelings. We could control how we express our feelings. We can't control the thoughts that enter, but we can control how we allow ourselves to process or not to process those thoughts. But one thing for sure, perhaps there are modalities and layers and armors that were necessary at a certain stage of our lives. But by now we've just become accustomed to them. Perhaps they weren't even in our lives. Perhaps they were passed down from the previous generation. And we just put them on loud and proud. Where are we going to see this? We spoke about several times here that the Lubavitcher Rebbe explains that anxiety is born where there's a friction between the body and the soul. Body and the soul being a husband and wife, the body being the wife, the soul being the husband, have to be in harmony. When they're pulling towards 2 different directions, that's when the friction and the tension and the anxiety starts coming out. Well, in trying to retain the old modalities, the old style of thinking, the old armors in today as we're growing is going to create that inner tension. And we're going to feel anxious because of it. We're going to feel defeated even before we began because of this. We're going to misinterpret everything because of this. For this reason, one of the most important things that we need to understand is thoughts, speech, and action are just garments. They're not us. Just like if a garment gets tattered, ripped, stained, we could take it off, clean it up, or replace it. So too our thoughts don't define us. Our words don't define us. Our actions don't define us. We, once realizing that a certain paradigm no longer fits, or is in clear impediment if we want to be honest with ourselves, to our value, to our purpose, to our strength, to our marriages, to our parenthood, to our life. Why do we hold on to it? Other than the fear of letting go of what was. For this, we have to also understand a very, very foundational point that the Baal Shem Tov teaches from Kabbalah. That the world in itself is not one solid. Time and space are not solids. Time and space are being created every single instant anew from nothing to something. So the example I could show you is, if I wanted to take just this little piece of the napkin, by trying to latch onto it, I'm grabbing the entirety. Many times we're upset, we get angry, triggers, emotional, unhealed wounds, situational background, and so on and so forth. Why do we continue? Because we don't realize one truth: that was, that's not now. Kabbalah explains that every single second is literally a brand new existence that never happened before. And the people that experience, meaning us, that experienced that 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, the people who were sitting here a second ago don't exist anymore. We're literally brand new entities with faint memories of the past. And for that reason, no matter what happened until now, it's not one conglomerate. Well, it already happened. You already said this happened. That's it. Well, yes, in the past, it did happen, but not now. And for that reason, whatever garments, whatever thought, speech, and action you deem necessary at that point are no longer necessary now. Why hold on to them if they're just going to restrict and constrict you? We've got to understand that we are in control of our thought, speech, and action. Namely, to ask ourselves a very powerful question. It does require self-awareness. Do the way I view, perceive, see, react, or respond, does that reveal the real me? Am I aligned with what I'm about to say? How I'm about to respond? Am I aligned with it? Or is this a reaction from the ego, from the animal soul, pertinent to previous situations that have really nothing to do with right now? Is this going to help me further grow and further grow my family and further grow my, or is it going to take away or suspend me? And that's a very important question. But one thing we need to really, really ruminate it over and internalize because this is a game changer. We've shown the experiment several times in our morning classes. I'll do it once again. What's your name? Mordechai.
Yes.
Mordechai. Yeah. Mordechai, what do you see?
Seltzer bottle.
What do you see happening right now?
Moving it from side to side.
What's moving it side to side?
Your arm is moving it.
Okay, very beautiful, right? So, on the factual level, yeah, my hand, my arm, my wrist are latched onto this bottle, moving it right and left and right, etc., etc. But really, what's happening behind the scenes is currently my mind tells my brain to send a signal to my arm, to send a signal to my wrist to grab on this bottle. And if you want to be more truthful about it, my neshama, my soul, is relating to my mind, to relate to my brain, to relate to my wrist, to pick up this bottle right now and swing it back and forth. You want to be a little bit more esoteric, but absolutely truthful about it, because we understand, we know that God sends a signal to my soul, which sends a signal to my mind, which sends a signal to my brain, which sends a signal to my wrist, which sends a signal to my fingers to pick up, because there's a godly spark that needs to be interacted right now, and move it to the right, to the left, because everything is energy. And so everything that Mordechai and everybody, for that matter, as a matter of fact, sees right now is only the mechanical, the last stage of the mechanics. So too with every single stage of our lives, no matter how it came, that was only the mechanical part of it. Like Joseph, when relating to his brother, why is he not holding sentiments of revenge for everything they did to him? All the loss and all the trauma that he experienced. He said it very simple. You had your plans, but God sent me here. You were the arms that delivered me here. But it was God. If it wasn't you, it would be somebody else. But it was God. When we internalize that point, that nothing happened to us, it happened for us. There's, as some things are painful, some things are pleasurable. However, the difference between...
But even the painful ones,
But
it's
even-
happening for you.
But the
Everything.
difference between pain and suffering is in meaning.
It's the meaning that we get.
Because when we go to the gym and we work out and it starts burning and you start feeling sore and you're sweating, you're really uncomfortable, it hurts. And sometimes when you're really working out, you're going to be really sore and tense. You're shredding your arms and fibers. It hurts. But one thing we don't call it suffering. You know why? Because it has meaning.
That's
It
it.
has no pain, no gain, right? As a matter of fact, they tell you if you don't feel that strength, if you don't feel that pain,
didn't work hard
you're
enough.
not doing anything. You're just strolling along. It's very nice. Keep up, but you're not working out. However, in contrast to that, if we would be walking in the middle of the street and God forbid we out of nowhere start feeling that pain and that burning and that ripping, that suffering, where's that coming from? That's scary. That shouldn't be happening now. What we deem as suffering is basically unknowable pain. And we deem that we need to understand everything. We can't possibly understand everything. Science tells us that we're only aware of 5% of the world in front of us. We don't see Wi-Fi waves, delta waves, gamma waves.
So I love what you're saying. Okay, so in other words, because we feel the need to know everything and we can't possibly know everything, that's why we experience suffering.
Right. But that's idolatrous.
Simple.
Because that's
It's idolatry,
as though there's no
absolutely
God,
valid,
and God has
wow.
nothing to do with this.
And look at how simple life is, and we make it difficult.
I heard a,
Really? Seriously.
I heard a
It's
great,
simple. Let go.
I heard a great explanation recently from someone. We spoke about many times that Kabbalah says that getting angry is tantamount to idol worship.
Yeah.
Well, he gave me an insight to this, which really revised the way I look at it. Many times when we discuss this, we discuss it on the plane of the emotion being the fact that I don't like it and I shouldn't happen to it, and so on and so forth. Well, he gave me a whole revision. He says the idolatry is the idol is the other person. You're making the other person an idol, as though he is God. And he has the power to change
So
something
wait, then
about
that
you.
would go with any emotion. that
Exactly.
you're feeling.
So wait a second.
Oh.
This person has the ability to go against God's plan for your life?
There you go.
No. You might not understand. It might be pain, but that's not him. He's God. That's emunah. For that reason, Alter Rebbe says in the Tanya that someone who becomes frustrated and dejected and upset and angry shows that their faith needs to be increased. Because when we truly have faith in Hashem, we acknowledge that we don't understand. And it's okay. That's how do we connect to infinity? our limited mind, which barely is aware of a fraction of the reality that's present right now in the room, let alone the universe and the cosmos. And we want, you want to hear, it's a crude, but it was told by a very famous Rabbi Reuven Dunin, alav shalom. He was about Shuvah, became a great mentor for thousands of thousands, but he had a very sharp tongue. He was also an agriculture farmer in Israel, in Haifa. And once somebody one of his disciples comes to him and says, Rabbi, I have a very big issue. This is what your issue is. He says, how could God allow a Holocaust? How does that make sense? Reuven Dunin looks at him and says, hold on, I would like to answer your question, but I'm sitting right now in deep contemplation. Something's really bothering me. If you could help me with that, I'll be more than happy to answer your question. He says, sure, Rabbi, what can I help you with? He says, here's the thing, I have 2 horses. And when one horse poops, it goes straight. It just like pumps down, while the other horse poops starts spiraling down. And the guy looks at him and is like, what? He says, yeah, you don't understand. I'm watching and it's repeated. I don't understand it. I feed them the same hay. They sleep in the same barn. They prance around in the same field. They get this. They get the same treatment. Why is this one's poop straight and the other one spirals? And the guy looks at the rabbi like he's insane. He's like, what? He said, yeah, this is really bothering me. I can't go on. This has really got to me. So he says, Rabbi, how should I know? So the rabbi says, you're telling me you don't understand the horse poop, but you're trying to understand God.
There you go. There you go.
In other words, the basics of reality is beyond us. And yet we try to understand God. Well, Chassidut, the inner dimension of Torah, teaches us as deep as we could go to understand God and godliness. But all of what we could attach and learn is God in relationship to creation. God is not a creator. He's not a creator.
God is not a creator.
No, he creates.
He created from the
He
beginning of
he
time.
creates. No, he creates and he's constantly creating. But that's not his essence. You're a mommy, you're a daddy. You're a daddy, right? You remember when your child first looks at you at 1 year old, looks at you the first time he says, mommy, or daddy, or Baba June, mama, I don't know, whatever it is, right? Does the child understand what mommy and daddy have to go through and who they are? And for the child, they think, you ask a child 1 year old or 2 years old, 3 years old, what happens to mommy and daddy when you go to preschool? He'll tell you they're sitting and waiting all day for me next to my room. Because everything must revolve around him. Not understanding that his mommy and daddy is a very, very foundational part of our lives. Yes. But there's more to us, essentially more to us than that. There's the couple first before mommy and daddy. And then it goes higher and higher. We want to understand God. We can. So with faith, first and foremost, accept all causes, all stimulus is God. It's not him, it's not her. It's not this, it's not that. It's God. Now, how we choose to view and understand that God gives this to us with the question mark. If God, being that God is giving this to me out of his benevolence, his infinite benevolence, he must see something so strong about me that I was yet to be aware of. For that was born the sentiments, don't ask what's wrong with me, but what's wrong with me.
Strong with me.
If this is what God is giving to me now, must mean that there's an inner reserve of strength that I've never tapped into yet. And in order to be able to move forward and upwards, I must reach deep inside myself. Let go, let in what? Let your godly soul into you.
Let go and let God. But, I mean, we can't always rewrite the chapters of our story, but we can rewrite how we choose to live inside of those stories, right? So ask yourself, what story am I ready to stop living from? And what story do I want to start writing, right? We are the authors of that. Hashem writes the circumstances, but we write the responses to those circumstances. That's where our control is. The deeper story, though, it's important to always realize is hidden, right? Sometimes only years later we understand, and sometimes we never understand. But I really want you guys to think, can you remember something painful that happened to you at some point in life that later on actually made sense? Right? We can all think about that. The example, like a breakup happened and then you met someone even better, right? A hardship happened and you learned, a loss of a business, but you learned how to run that business and you became successful afterwards, right? So again, Hashem brings in the circumstances. We write our responses and we write the stories that go with it. So what story do you want to write? Look at that. Ask yourself that question. Where am I going next? What do I want to do next? Am I going to sit in my pain? Am I going to allow that to dictate who I am? Am I going to ask why, and limit myself? Or is it time to say, okay, what's next? What's next? Let's go. This happened. Hashem, you believed in me enough to wake me up this morning and bring me to this, and this is being done for me. What's next? Let's go. Okay? So the chapters that hurt you are actually the chapters that shaped you. Who you are at this very moment is exactly who you're supposed to be to get you ready for the next chapter of your life.
There's a powerful, we were discussing this yesterday, a powerful realization that emanates from this. And we discussed it in the morning class today, and we're going to further this tomorrow as well. When you truly realize that, when I say truly realize, I mean, it's not just being aware of that. Yeah, divine providence, it was meant to be. Or, I don't understand God, so no, when you truly realize that it was for you, as the sentiment that came out of a very difficult period of my life is all of that brought me here, my entire life, with all the pain and all, breaking, going through physical surgery and life-threatening situations and ups and downs and everything else between that. At a certain point, you come to realize that all of that brought you here. To learn and to know who you really are and what you're here to do and everything. And if it could have been any different, God would have made it different for you. When one truly realizes this, there's an automatic revision that happens retroactively, which is ultimate let go. Let go of what? Resent, anger, despondency. Because of all of the things that you went through, perhaps you had hard parents or difficult siblings or even a hard childhood and ups and downs and everything. And therefore the animal keeps account, keeps account in order to protect itself. This experience will be recorded for training purposes, right? And so, the animal does that perfectly. That's where all the trauma lays in the animal soul, right? And because of that, whatever. But when we truly realize this, we immediately revise all of our angst against all the people that we
stop
feel.
Blaming and shaming yourself and everyone around you.
It's not that we stop shaming. We just, as a matter of fact, it's not just stop shaming. It's like, oh, so this was for me. Not only I shouldn't blame or shame, I'm okay with you. I'm good with you. I didn't realize your point, the point of why God put you into my life and why you did this, but now I get it. If any ingredient would have been different, I would have been different. I would have had what I need to have. So yes, all this brought me here. Therefore, I no longer need my defense layers because perhaps they're matched then, but not the now. And if it didn't, it's not matching the now, then why am I holding on to it? Especially if I see that it's bringing inks and in friction. It doesn't match. It's like, well, think about this. What, 3-4 months ago, even 2 months ago, it was pretty cold. Pesach, there was a period, it was pretty cold here, right? We all walked out with coats and even scarves, and I was with a hat, with a beanie hat and everything else. Imagine now walking 83 degrees with the same coat, scarf, beanie hat, and with the long johns, because it matched just 2 months ago. But understanding that when things change, you need to consider, are these clothes appropriate for the season? Are these garments of my soul appropriate for the season of my life right now? Are they revealing me or are they hiding me? Am I holding them onto them for comfort? Or are they really prudent in order to move forward? And this takes self-awareness.
It's incredible though, when you start thinking like that and you actually start putting it into action, you start thinking along those lines with everything. It just becomes your go-to. Oh, okay, this is happening for a reason. I don't need to know
For
why.
truth.
And it's okay. And it's okay. Next. You just keep moving forward. The stagnancy just goes away. You know? It's like an incredible feeling when you start literally let go and let God. Okay, all right, Hashem. Okay, this is what you think I should be doing. This is what you need me to do, or this is what's happening. Okay, who am I to judge it? Like literally, who am I to judge it? I'm like, you know better. I don't know anything.
Well,
Let's
the
go.
judgment has to be like a judge issues out a judgment, a ruling. Once we truly understand that, now we have to make a firm ruling with ourselves. That from this point on, my thoughts, my words, and actions should be consistent
shift.
in every
Have to
single,
shift.
in the prompts that we give to create the songs. And especially when I made a video the other day for Amber Glow, which was born from oversleeping and ended up in the Bronx in the middle of the morning, and you see
I
cracks.
love how much fun you're having with this.
Oh yeah. This is listen. Anyway, but you have to put a prompt, make the character consistent in every frame of the production. So we have to make a judgment that if, being that I know that this is truth, from this point on, my style of thinking, my style of communicating, my style of action has to be consistent with this
shift.
truth.
You have to shift.
You don't have to be shift. No, you're good. You're good. Ilana Leah said something so powerful the other night in the women's class. We don't have to heal our inner child. Our inner child is just fine. It's pure, it's innocent, it's excitable, it's
We're healing
curious.
ourselves.
It's the layers that we compounded over and over and over and over on top of that inner child that we
It's
must
in
remedy.
between you and your
Right.
inner child.
You are fine. You don't have to heal. You're fine. Telling yourself, I'm broken, I'm fragmented, I need to No. Tshuva doesn't mean you have to change anything about you. Tshuva means go back to you, your original self. Embody yourself, aligned with the true self.
That's from the podcast.
That's from our
beautiful.
from our cheap plug. We have a second time around a podcast about marriage, how to find the second time around in your first marriage, and what happens in your second marriage. How do you, that was exactly our
Oh, you're doing a
conversation.
podcast
Yeah.
together? Oh,
And that was
nice.
exactly the point.
That's from the podcast.
That was exactly the question that we had, which
great.
was brought up, which was, how do you not allow your past and everything you went through to interfere with the present? And that's a whole conversation itself. The podcast is coming out very soon,
great.
Baruch Hashem.
Because
to-
you're a different person. The person you were previously, you are no longer. So So the situation is completely different, and your reaction
Right.
is completely different.
Yeah, but those stories that you tell yourself will limit you to go forward. The
Well,
ability to.
Well, we gave an example today morning's class, where when you're driving and looking in the rearview mirror, you're not. It doesn't.
Doesn't work.
I bet you. No. I mean, we have to look at the rearview mirror for that, but it never occurs to us while we're looking at the rearview mirror. I was just there 30 seconds ago. What I'm looking at. We never think about that. Why? Because that's not pertinent. What's pertinent is I need to look back in order to move forward. That's it. Not ruminate. I was there. This hurt me, and this. No. Because if you're going to say that, guess what?
Right.
This is going to be the end.
Right.
Over here, you can't hold on to that. The only time we reference what happened is when we need to move forward, recognizing that what happened was there by God's deliberate for our purpose. And for that reason, don't hold on to pains and stuff like that. Understand, yes, it happened. Yes, it happened the way I remember it for the most part, because I need to remember, well, you could be in the same scenario and you will see it one way, I'll see it another way. That's pertinent to our tikkun. That's pertinent to our correction. That's why I have
You
to.
also remember the emotions you felt from it more than the actual.
Well, the emotions, many times we could recognize, especially once we're older, that there might have been childish emotions, or there must. I give an example. The day that I let go of all the anxiety that I had with my mother from growing up, because we were very close, and then something got into part of us, and then we had a very difficult upbringing and so on and so forth. Again, parents do their best, but I remember that aha moment when I recognized that, you know what, when all the things I resent my mom for, perhaps not being present enough, and then this. As an adult, I started thinking, well, you know, I'm an adult now, and I have children, and there's times I'm not present. And why? Not because I'm trying to be away from them, but because I need to build for them, and there's no other way, and I have to. So all of a sudden, when you start thinking that, wait a second, they were doing their best with a limited understanding and no tools in the previous generation. And our Instagram Reels today, in 1 hour, you could find more psychological tools and more spiritual tools that were available in the previous generation to the commoners. And so what did they have that we could look down on them and say, they had all the pressures. They were children of Holocaust survivors or communist survivors.
Whatever it was,
or,
that's their story.
right?
We can't allow it.
But
to
we can look down.
judge them. We
Once
can't
we
judge them.
understand that and we really internalize that, well, then you know what? That moment revises everything.
Everything.
All of a sudden you get it, instead of blaming and shaming and being angry, you get such an appreciation. Look at what they went through, and despite that, and because of that, they pushed further.
You could say that about everyone in your life.
Right, exactly.
Especially people that hurt you. You know, I always tell my clients, you're hurt by someone, pray for them. Pray for them. Literally, when you start to pray for someone and you start to really say, you know what, just as I'm doing my best, that person is also doing their best. That's it. They can't do any better than this. That's their best. Accept it and pray for them and let it go. And let it go.
And what?
Yeah.
And the obvious question is, and what if, from your perception, they're not doing their best? Truth is, that's from your perception.
Exactly.
You have
Exactly.
no idea what they're going through, what they're processing.
That's a you problem.
That's a you issue. That's we spoke about it yesterday morning's class, right? That's a you. You don't see that in them. Then you have to start looking at yourself. Why don't you see the goodness? Because if you're truly in touch with yourself, you will be seeing goodness in everyone, at all times, with all people, in all places. When you don't see the goodness in yourself, because you're not attached to yourself, because you're attached to the layering of yourself, that's when you start noticing others' layerings, and you become hyper focused on their layering rather than them. And that's so pertinent, because how many relationships and how many situations get devastated because we don't see each other. We don't listen to each other. We see what's that expression we don't see, we don't love what we see what we love. Whatever we're aligned with, that's what we're going to see. That's what's going to give us our
Oh,
perspective.
and there's so many misunderstandings, so many miscommunications. all the time they're coming at you. And I had a client tell me a story. She takes things very, very personal. No matter what happens, she, with everyone, she just gets very triggered and very upset. And she's a teacher in a school and works with like 5th to 8th graders who can sometimes be not so nice, right? And she was telling me that, because we were working on this, you got to think bigger. Maybe you don't see everything. The things are misunderstandings. And she said, Liz, you don't believe what happened. I said, what? She said, I went up to this boy, who was usually not a nice boy. And I asked him, he had like a box of Oreos or something. And she said, can I have a cookie? And he put his hand inside the cookies and he rummaged around and he picked one up and he handed it to me. And at first I got so angry but I paused and I took a breath and I said to him, thank you for the cookie. Usually when you want to give someone a cookie, it's better if you hold the box out and let them choose, right? She said before she would have gone off the deep end. But do you know what this boy's response was? He said, oh, Maura, these are all broken. I was looking for a whole one to give you. Okay? So from her perspective and her her viewpoint, this boy wasn't doing something so nice. And if she didn't pause to actually give it an opportunity, it was a complete misunderstanding. He was actually doing something very nice for her.
That sentiment needs to be drawn, especially in today's world, to our spouses and very importantly to our children.
Oh, yes.
Because, how many times do we come with demands from our children? Why aren't you like this? And why don't you do this? And when are you going to get your life together? And what's the matter with you? Why can't you be more like that? And you have all the opportunities. You're just wasting your life. And all of these,
These are all our problems.
Right? Now, I'll tell you like this. And so too with the spouses that I hear, well, my wife or my husband is just not doing enough. They're just not, I want him to be more, I want somebody, somebody told me I want a wife that's going to come and learn with me and is going to sit with me and is going to do this with me and she doesn't like learning and she doesn't like this and she's too busy with her work and one of the important points is perspective. I heard a lecture about maybe 10 years ago where changed my entire understanding of parenting. Began with one particular lecture, and the example he gave was, imagine there's a big rabbi walking in the street, and all of a sudden he's accosted by a band of thugs, and they circle around him and he says, "You, Rabbi, you're going to worship an idol now. We want you to bow down to an idol." They put an idol in front of him. He says, bow down to it. He says, no. He says, if you don't, we're going to beat you up. He says, you do what you got to do. I'm not. So one of them socks him in the stomach and immediately keels over. And somebody takes a picture. And then says, you going to bow down or not? He says, no. So they sweep his legs and now he's on his hands and knees, right in front of his idol. Another picture. Next morning, the New York Times says Rabbi bows down to idol. Not realizing how much pain and suffering he had to go through not to do it. How the beatings he got and received because he refused to. And it was them that really pushed him and he fell. He didn't want to be there. How many times do we not recognize the other's angst, the other's tensions, the other's pains, what they've been through that's giving the hang-ups or whatever, or perhaps we don't even understand it's not even a hang-up. Sometimes we just don't value what they're already doing, and we minimize it. And we say, no, it's not. And we spoke about the other day in class that the more we focus on who the person is and what they're not doing, the less we notice what they are doing, how good they are.
True. Very true.
So I had a student. I hate testing and I hate grading because I don't believe that a grade or test could exemplify the student himself. But nevertheless, you have to give. So I had a student that just never did his homework. He failed virtually every single test. He was a good kid. I mean, like inside, I mean, he was a good kid, but scholastically, I revised the lesson for him. I sat with him. I explained to him, no. When I met with his father, he attended our shul. I said, listen, greeting time is coming, and I don't really have what to show for your child. He failed every single quiz. He missed out several tests. There's no homeworks. He barely participates in class. He puts his head down. He's helpful. He's nice, but. So I said, who's this with him at home? He says, I don't know. I work all day. Maybe my wife. I said, well, he doesn't do homework. What does he do when he comes back home? He says, he sits from 3:45 until 11, 12 o'clock playing Xbox. So why did you take the Xbox away? He said, because then he won't like me. He's not going to like me as a parent. I said, maybe you don't understand your role. But then I started probing deeper. And then a big aha moment occurred to me. When I realized what was really going on behind the background, the constant fighting between the parents.
Absolutely.
And the trauma that this kid was being exposed to day in and day out. I realized the very fact that he comes to school and he tries from time to time to participate. He's helpful. That's him trying. That's his best. I don't live in that home. I have no idea what that's like. So how could I pass a judgment call on something I have no clue about? Thinking that I'm doing him a favor by telling him you could do better. That's like telling somebody who's drowning, listen, here, let me give you a point of advice. You see that sign that says, don't jump in the water at 500, you jumped. Next time don't.
Yeah. And next life don't.
So it's like that's so unempathetic. That's so wrong on so many different reasons. And we do this to spouses, do to each other, and families, and so on and so forth. Judging a person based on our own assumption, or even the facts that we do know. But how do we know the absolute truth of where they were, what was going through, and why did it happen? We don't. We have to lift them upwards, raise them upwards.
Well, many of these judgments that we put upon other people are based exactly on those stories that we've told about ourselves, right?
Right.
So going back to the story I was telling you just now with the teacher, her story has been from childhood, I'm not good enough. So when someone does that with the, cookies and swirls it around and hands her a manhandled cookie, right? Automatically her go-to is, even this kid doesn't think I'm good enough or I'm worthy enough for him to show me the box of cookies, right? So these stories that we tell ourselves in the background of how we live our lives, they're lurking there, they're sitting there. Our awareness must come in and notice it when it comes and switch it. Look at it. Is it serving you? If it's something that's no longer serving you, change it. Move from it. Imagine a year from now. You stop living from fear. You stop repeating your old stories. You trusted more. You reacted less. You paused more. You believed that Hashem was with you no matter what. And you stopped defining yourself by your pain. Ask yourself, what are you becoming? What story do you want to tell yourself about your life now? Become that author. Now finish the sentence, because the rest of your life may very well be shaped by the story that you choose to believe. From this moment forward, finish this line. The story that I'm ready to begin with is what? It's in your hands. Where do you want to go next? What's next?
For sure, one thing, there's no such story in our lives, and they live happily ever after.
I was telling them that before. And the prince saves the princess and they live happily ever after.
There's happily never after. Never
I
after.
have an addition to that. They lived happily ever after they worked on themselves.
No, that means that they lived happily never after. Because it's never after. It's not when this is going to happen and I'm going to get this part
It'll
of my life. Then I'll be
never
happy.
stop. It'll
Now,
never stop.
Right now, we have to be aligned. We have to be happy. As Ilana's post yesterday, Kiva Simcha Teiseu, that famous line, the famous psukim that we say, Motzei Shabbos, when we bless each other, from the prophet, Kiva Simcha Teiseu v'Shalom Tovanu. You'll go for in happiness you will come out and you will be led with shalom, etc. The Rebbe explains that the depth of this is that if a person finds themselves in dire straits, constraints, then their one key is happiness, joy.
Joy.
With joy and happiness, you will come out of this. If a person wants to be morose and this and melancholy, etc., then not only are they going to come out of this, they're going to double down the layering, and they're going to have to.
That's tantamount to idol worship.
That's exactly what it is. That's why a yid, we are commanded to serve Hashem with happiness and joy, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. I have a question.
Yeah.
So July 1st, the following day is the fast of Tammuz. Do you want to do then or July 8th for the next one?
Oh, that would be perfect. No, but that sounds good. That would be perfect.
What, July 1st?
Whatever.
The night before the.
Not the night
The
before,
fast.
the afterwards.
Okay, so
The
July
3
8th. So our next rabbi and coach will be on July 8th.
Responding to trauma.
Is that what you want to do?
It's a 3 weeks destruction.
Oh, I'd love
How
it.
to- how
Okay,
to
so I'll leave
transform
this one.
destruction.
I was going to do 10 smart things that successful relationships do, but
That could be
that could be the one after.
That could be an Av, Menachem Av, the 15th, for the 15th of Menachem Av, the day of love.
Okay, responding to trauma. There we go. That is our next.
Thank you
That
very
is
much.
our next topic.